Hi, guys. My name is Adam. I'm 14 years old. My parents are doctors. My sister is 3 years older than me. We're a happy family. We have lots of fun together. We always look on the bright side of every situation. Unfortunately, something very upsetting happened recently. It made me realize that you can grow up and mature in a matter of days. My uncle and his family live in another city. They visit us once or twice a year, always bringing us gifts when they come. During their last visit, they brought us a box of chocolates that they had bought in Belgium. We finally understood why Belgian chocolate is so famous. They were all so delicious, so we ate a little too much. My mom had to take the box away from us. If they're that good, don't finish them all in one sitting. You can only have one per day, and I'll give them to you, she said. We weren't happy, but she was the boss, and we knew that she wasn't going to back down. The next day, when my parents were at work, we remembered the chocolates. Not that we ever stopped thinking about them. Where could my mom have hidden them? If we managed to find them, she'd be angry, but we also knew that it wouldn't be long before she forgave us. So we started looking for the chocolates, but we couldn't find the box anywhere. It looked like my mom was really serious about hiding it. We started looking in the least likely spots. When we were searching through my dad's desk, we found a key that looked really old. There was a wooden box in his room. My dad had worked at a hospital in Afghanistan at some point. We knew that my parents were often writing to each other then. All the letters were inside that box. Could my mom have hidden the chocolates there? We opened the box with the key. And bingo! We were so happy and started eating right away. Meanwhile, my sister started jokingly reading a letter that my dad had written. My beloved, the days are short, but the months don't seem to end. I have missed you so much. So I started going through the box to find a letter from my mom to read as a response. I came across a folder. I showed it to my sister and read what it said on it. Child Protection Services, Adoption Department. We looked at each other in confusion. Would we be crossing the line if we opened the folder? But we couldn't stop. My mom came in just as we were about to open the folder. But she didn't say anything. She just gulped. In a very calm voice, "Go to your rooms, both of you," she said. We didn't look inside. I know what we did was wrong, but aren't you going to tell us what's going on? My sister asked. My mom didn't even look and just showed us the door. I said, "Go to your rooms." We left without saying another word. We had kind of figured it out. When I went to my room, I immediately Googled Child Protection Services Adoption Department. Just as I thought, these documents were about adoption. I texted my sister the link. She replied with another link about the same subject. She was also trying to find answers online. My dad came home soon after. We didn't know what was going on, but the house was very tense. We were waiting anxiously in our rooms. I heard my mom call my sister. Then I heard the front door close. Where could they have gone? I was so curious. Just then my dad came in. He said my mom and sister went out for a walk. He was being really quiet, as if he didn't know where to begin. A few times he cleared his throat, but still didn't manage to say anything. Finally, he took a deep breath. "Adam, I want this to stay between us, at least for a while," he said. I was getting more and more nervous. I didn't want to hear the rest. Why couldn't they have told me I was adopted? Didn't they think that it would come out eventually? Tears started falling from my eyes. I wasn't crying. I just couldn't stop the tears from falling. My dad looked at me. "Adam, it's time you learned the truth, but promise me that you won't tell your sister that she is adopted. This is really important. Deal?" he said. Wait a minute. It's my sister who was adopted? I looked at him in shock. I should have been happy because I'd felt so sad when I thought that it was me, but it was my sister who was adopted. That idea was so painful. This meant that my sister wasn't my real sister, right? She would be so sad if she found out that I wasn't her real brother. Of course, I couldn't tell her this. Even if my dad told me to tell her, I would keep this a secret forever. I couldn't bear making her sad. The next few days were very difficult. It was as if my sister and I had made a pact not to mention that day again. But I could see that the love between us was even stronger now. She was coming to my room a lot, making all these weird faces to make me laugh. I knew that whether or not she was my biological sister, she was my real sister. In fact, I started to love her even more after finding out that she was adopted. People naturally love their siblings, but loving someone you're not related to is so much more meaningful. Don't you agree? Pretty soon, we were as happy as we used to be. I had already forgotten about what had happened. In fact, I was planning on saying to my dad, "Let's tell my sister everything. It really doesn't matter that she's adopted. I love her more than a biological sister." Just around that time, my dad came into my room. "We think that your sister should learn the truth. However, we have a favor to ask you. We'll talk to her, but first we wondered if you'd like to write her a letter, telling her how you feel." Normally, this would be something I would refuse, but I was happy to do it. Yet, I realized that writing such a letter was a lot more difficult than I expected. Yes, from my perspective, nothing had changed, but what was my sister going to think when she found out that she was adopted? How could I explain this without hurting her? I thought about it for days. I'd start and erase it over and over. I didn't even have the first sentence. Then, I had an idea. If she was adopted, for how long had she been my sister? I mean, was she here when I was born? Or did she come after me? I'd tried to remember our oldest memory to figure this out. There were so many memories from the time when I was a toddler, but which one was the oldest? I decided that the one that I barely remembered must have been the oldest. In this memory, we're somewhere where there are a lot of kids. We're running towards something. I don't know where this was. Like I said, I barely remember it. I trip on something and fall. Only one of the kids stops. The one who stops is, of course, my sister. She helps me up, checks if my knees are scraped, and then picks me up. Then we start running towards the other kids. I started my letter with this memory. "You've been my sister all this time, and you'll always be my sister," I continued. "Not having the same mother does not weaken our bond, but only makes it stronger." I started crying, telling her how much I loved her, how I'll always love her, and that nothing will change that. Every word I wrote was true. I just wrote whatever I was feeling. Finally, the big day arrived. My dad texted me during the day asking, "Is your letter ready?" When I said that it was, "You can give it to her tonight," he said. It wasn't tense at home anymore. It was like we were all finally relaxed and in a really good mood. When my dad signaled me with his eyes, I knew it was time. "Let's meet in my office," he said. My sister was there when I entered. The wooden box that started it all was on the desk. My parents were smiling. I had put the letter in an envelope. I gave it to my sister. She was shocked. She gave me a piece of paper too. When I opened it, I saw that it was a letter that started with, "My dear Adam." I was so confused. Why did she write me a letter? We went to opposite corners of the room to read. I couldn't believe my eyes. My sister was saying that I was adopted. Just like me, she had written about how much she loved me and that whether or not I was her biological brother made no difference to her. After reading, we first looked at each other and then to our parents. My dad took out the adoption papers from the box and told us to come closer. He showed us the folder. Yes, we were both adopted. It wasn't just my sister. I was adopted too. My sister and I looked at each other. We couldn't help it and started laughing. There was no distinction between us. We were in the same boat. We shared the same fate. We hugged each other. Then my parents joined in. The four of us hugged for a while. Then we went to dinner. My parents apologized for keeping this a secret. They said they were going to tell us when the time was right, but that the chocolates had accelerated the process. When the whole thing began, my mom called a psychiatrist that she works with. She said this wasn't her specialty and asked the child psychologist to help out. That's how this idea of letters came up. My parents thought it was a good plan, so they took action. Well, you know the rest. We learned something else that day too. My parents had intended to only adopt my sister. They didn't know about me. But my sister didn't want to leave me behind. She threw herself on the floor, crying, "He is my brother. I won't leave Adam here," she kept saying. Apparently, she named me Adam. We're not sure, but we think that it's a name from her biological family. My parents caved in and decided to adopt us both. As you can see, we were really siblings from the beginning.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amelia. I'm 13 years old. I have an amazing life story. A homeless man adopted me. I can't wait for the day I get to call him Dad. You might wonder how that's even possible. Once you hear my story, I'm sure you'll find it amazing too. I never knew my real dad, and my mom passed away when I was 8. I'm not going to say anything else about my real parents because talking about them makes me really sad. So yes, I became an orphan when I was little. I didn't have any relatives that could take me in, so I was sent to live in an orphanage. People don't think of orphanages as nice places, but the other kids there and I were happy most of the time. Imagine a bunch of kids living together. We'd play all the time. The orphanage had a school, so we studied together too. Perhaps we all got along because we were all there for the same reason. Most of the people working there who took care of us were good to us too. Our lives at the orphanage were pretty good, but most kids still wanted to be adopted. We dreamed about it. Imagine, a family comes, meets with some of the kids, and then picks one that would go to live with them. Only 4 or 5 kids would get lucky each month. We'd all get jealous of the ones who got adopted. You know what was the main reason for our jealousy? Because they'd get to call 2 people Mom and Dad. You'd have to live in an orphanage to understand how much we missed those words. I became one of the kids that was envied when I was 12. I was adopted not by a family, but a single woman. She was a retired judge. I couldn't sleep for a week when I learned that she picked me. I'd dream about the moment I'd call her Mom for the first time. Parents would come to pick up their new kids on Sundays. I said bye to my friends and everyone at the orphanage after breakfast. My new mom came an hour later. As I was leaving, I thought this was the happiest day of my life, but my excitement didn't last long. Her name was Harriet. In our first conversation at home, she said, "You'll call me Miss Harriet. I go to bed late and I wake up late. I want my breakfast ready when I'm up." I quickly realized that she didn't want a child, but a servant that she could train from a young age. She didn't enroll me in a school, which is against the adoption requirements. I wasn't allowed to leave the house, so I couldn't report her. I swear I'm not exaggerating, but she was just like the stepmother in Cinderella. I spent my days working for her nonstop. She was never satisfied with anything I did. She'd scream at me every chance she got. I really missed the orphanage. At night, I'd cry under the covers. After 7 to 8 months, I resigned myself to my new life. I knew I didn't belong in that house, but I was too young to think about escaping. I had noticed that Miss Harriet always kept the front door locked so I could never leave the house, not even to take out the trash. One day, I saw that Miss Harriet was really sad. Her eyes were swollen from crying. For the first time in months, she talked to me like I was a normal person. "Sit down," she said. So I did. It was the anniversary of her husband's death. She told me all about him just because she wanted to share it with someone. I was surprised that such an evil woman could love someone so much. She talked and cried and drank the whole time. Eventually, she got really drunk. I couldn't understand what she was saying anymore, but I still had to pretend I was listening. Finally, she passed out. I was about to go back to my room when I noticed a key. It was lying on the coffee table. Everything happened so quickly. I picked it up. Once I realized that it was the key to the front door, I unlocked the door and walked out without any hesitation. I went outside and started walking. I didn't stop until the sun started coming up. I was very tired. I came across a bench. Again, without even thinking, I laid down as if I just got to my own bed. I woke up to a woman standing by my feet. Her clothes were old and filthy. She had already taken off one of my shoes and was trying to get the other one. I tried pulling my foot away, but she had a tight grip on my shoe. Just then someone yelled, "Angela, leave the girl alone." I looked to see who it was. It was a man dressed in rags. The 2 of them were obviously homeless. Walking towards us, he said, "What will she wear if you take her shoes? Look, she's sleeping on the streets like us." So the woman named Angela let go of me unwillingly. That's how I met Gary. It was my first time talking to a homeless person. He had been living on the streets for 9 years and had a very sad story. He lost his wife and 2 daughters in a train accident. After that, he was overwhelmed by grief and couldn't bring himself to do anything. He stopped going to work and stayed home all day in the dark. A while later, he lost his job and couldn't pay his rent, so he started living on the streets. He was such a good man and super funny. He made me laugh all the time. I started living with him on the streets. Once he heard my story, he wanted me to go back to the orphanage. But I told him that Miss Harriet would definitely come and take me from there. Reporting her would be useless. She was a judge. They'd believe her instead of a kid. So he said, "Okay, then you can stay with me for a while. We'll look for a better place for you later. Deal," I said, nodding my head. But I didn't want to leave him at all, because it was the first time that I felt safe and relaxed with an adult. Gary taught me the main rule of living on the street. If you're homeless, you need to look it. After all, we live on other people's charity. I could go to a bathroom and wash my face, but who would give money to a clean, well-dressed person? He was right. So I did as he said. I made my face and clothes look as dirty as possible. One lesson and I had the perfect homeless look. We had to beg in the streets before each meal. Once we had made enough money, we'd go ahead and buy something to eat right away. That's why we never had money for the next meal. One day, after we had enough money for breakfast, we went to a bakery. Business owners usually tried to get rid of us as quickly as possible, so we wouldn't bother the other customers. But the woman at the bakery was really nice. She smiled and said, "Good morning. It's your lucky day because everything is free for girls your age today." Gary said, "Thank you, but today we have money." "Is it possible that a girl her age can get some free stuff another time?" he asked, and was about to give her our change. Suddenly, we heard a noise behind us. We turned to see what happened and saw that an older customer had fallen. The woman took out her cell phone in a panic. The old man on the floor was not moving. Gary put his cup on the counter and kneeled next to the man. He touched the man's neck with his hand. He closed his eyes and started counting. Then he put his hands together and pressed on the man's chest. Just then, the bakery owner said, "Don't touch him. I called an ambulance. A doctor should be doing this." Gary told her, "I am a doctor. His pulse is around 20. We can't wait for an ambulance. We have to act now," and continued pressing his hands on the man's chest. That old man was so lucky that Gary was there. He never told me what his job had been, so I was surprised to find out that he was a doctor. In fact, he was a brain surgeon, but of course he knew what to do when someone was having a heart attack. Later, he told me more about his old life. One day he had to travel to another city to perform a surgery, but it was his birthday the next day, so his wife and kids decided to surprise him by taking the train to visit him. And you already know what happened after that. The owner of the bakery refused to let us pay. Gary insisted, but she said, "It's your lucky day. Everything is free for anyone who saves someone's life today." We ended up getting to know her that day. Her name is Sadie. I think she's as funny as Gary. She lives with her mom. "I'd invite you over for dinner, but my mom may not be ready to have 2 homeless people coming by," she said, and we all cracked up. The next day was a Sunday, and we made plans to have a picnic in a park. We had to beg in the streets longer than usual to buy all the stuff for the picnic. Guess what happened next? Gary and Sadie started falling for each other. One day Sadie joked, "I decided to close the bakery and live with you on the streets because the only way I'll be able to tolerate your smell is if I start smelling like you." Gary said, "You know, that would be too much trouble. Instead of you smelling like us, we could start smelling like you. We just need a bath." That was a turning point in our lives. Of course, one bath wasn't enough, but it was a first step. Now we all live together. We have a lot of plans for the future, but the first one is for Gary and Sadie to get married. Then they're going to officially adopt me. After that, I'll be able to call them Mom and Dad. That's what they want. I already feel like saying it now, but I stopped myself. But I can tell you, they are my dear Mom and dear Dad, my lucky stars. My real mom would always pray, "May God bring good people into your life." That's exactly what happened. I hope the prayers someone says for you will come true one day too.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm going through a really difficult period. I need to tell you all about it so you can tell me what you think. Guys, I think I'm adopted. I'm serious. I've been thinking about this for a very long time. I finally asked my parents about it last month. They denied it. They said, "Of course not. Don't be silly. How did you come up with that?" They were very upset. My mom has migraines. After our conversation, she was in bed with migraines for 3 or 4 days. Of course, I felt terrible about that, but I don't believe them because of all the evidence I have. My parents, or my adopted parents, came up with all sorts of explanations for everything I see as proof. But I'm not convinced. Not knowing the truth is eating me up inside. Am I adopted? I would be so happy if you could tell me what you think once you hear the whole story. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself and my family. I'm 16 years old. I live in a small town. I had to take a break from school this year because of how this affected my mental health, but I want to go back. My mom doesn't work. My dad is in real estate. I have a brother who is 5 years younger than me. We don't have any financial problems. Clearly, I don't have a terrible life. We're a normal family with good days and bad days. I first started thinking about whether I'm adopted after we studied genetics at school. Both my parents and my brother have blue eyes. I have brown eyes. I learned this is not normal when studying for an exam. According to specialists, when both parents have blue eyes, there is a 99% chance that the child will have blue eyes, 0.5% chance they'll have green eyes, and 0.5% chance they'll have brown eyes. Guys, 0.5%, that's 1 in 200. That's so unlikely. Then there's the fact that I'm the only one in the family with curly hair. I couldn't find clear information about this online, but considering my eye color, this seems very unlikely too. My mom has straight hair, my dad has straight hair, my brother has straight hair. If I had wavy hair, maybe I could convince myself that it was okay, but the fact that it's super curly makes it very doubtful. Once I started thinking about it, I found so many physical differences. For example, my brother has dimples like my mom. Both my dad and my brother have a gap in their teeth. I know you're going to say, "Stop exaggerating," but my brother's toenails are exactly the same as my mom's. Their big toenail is larger than normal. Their little toe almost has no nail. Like I said earlier, my brother has blue eyes and straight hair, meaning he shares some physical qualities with our parents. Don't you think it's a little weird that I'm so different? Here's one more evidence for you. My mom is always on a diet, but she can never lose weight. My dad also has issues with his weight. In fact, once when my dad had problems with his heart, his doctor said, "If you don't lose weight, this heart won't be able to take it." He had to go on a diet, but he couldn't even lose a pound. My brother, mom, and dad all have strong appetites. There's always food around. Somebody's always eating something, but I couldn't care less about food. When I go to bed, I realize I forgot to eat. Everyone says that I eat too little. What can I do? I really don't have much appetite. I can't force myself to eat a lot. Unlike everyone else in the house, I'm the only one who actually wants to gain weight. Everyone knows that such things are genetic. If I was really their child, don't you think that I would have an appetite like they do? Isn't it abnormal that I'm so different? There's another thing that makes me think I'm adopted. My brother was born as a result of IVF treatment. Of course, nobody told me about this, but I kind of knew it, even when I was young. Once I heard my mom crying. I went to see what was happening. She was on the phone. She didn't see me. She was talking to my aunt. It didn't work again. We've spent a fortune on these treatments. I'm so fed up. I'm losing hope. I won't be able to have a child. I need to accept this, she said. At the time, I interpreted this as I won't be able to have another child. But when I started thinking that I might be adopted, I realized that my mom had meant I'm never going to have a child of my own. My brother was born nearly 2 years after this conversation. That means my mom must have continued with the treatment and finally managed to get pregnant. Whether I'm related to my brother biologically or not, I love him so much. I'm so glad he was born. He loves me too. But what if he stops loving me when he finds out that I'm not his real sister? That makes me really upset too. Finally, here's the most important proof that I foolishly believed until now. My baby photos begin from the age of 1. There are no photos of me as an infant, and neither are there photos of my mom when she was pregnant. My first photo is from my first birthday. The story they told me about this is that they saved the photos from my first year to a hard disk which got lost when we were moving. I was never suspicious, so I believed this for years. But really, wouldn't they have one printed photo of their first child? They would have framed it and put it somewhere in the house, or maybe made a magnet for the fridge or something. My dad says that he wanted to do it but couldn't because that year was so hectic with my birth, big problems at work, and moving to a new house. That's why they never got around to printing the photos. Only a child will believe that, as I did for all these years. According to the scenario that I've created in my mind, my parents couldn't have children after they got married. Probably, my mom went through treatments at the time as well, but couldn't get pregnant. So they adopted me. But they really wanted a child of their own, so they continued with the treatments. Like my mom said on the phone, they spent tons of money on them and finally had a child. Of course, they didn't get rid of me when my brother was born. They kept on raising me. But don't I have the right to know this most important fact about my life? Even though they don't treat me like I'm adopted, don't I have the right to know who my biological mom and dad are? Of course, it's my right, and I'm going to figure it out no matter what. The other thing that's bothering me is where and from whom they adopted me. I also have a theory about this. Let's see what you think. According to my research, there's an age limit for parents to adopt from an orphanage. That means you have to be a certain age. They couldn't have adopted me from a government agency because they were too young. They must have adopted me directly from a family or a single mother. The question then is, from whom? The answer is my aunt and uncle. In some families, when a couple can't have kids, another couple from within the family gives them a child. You get to help the loved one have a child while making sure that he or she will be well taken care of by someone you trust. Why do I think my aunt and uncle are my real parents? Let me tell you. First of all, my uncle has blue eyes just like my dad does, but my uncle's wife has brown eyes. This solves the eye color issue. They have 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. If you saw their youngest daughter's hair, I'm sure that you would agree with me because her hair is even curlier than mine. Another physical proof, everyone in their family except for my uncle is very thin. They live in another country, but I don't want to say where. They used to visit every summer when I was a kid. But they don't anymore. Because I think that my aunt, who is probably my real mom, gets really sad when she sees me. Who knows, maybe she regrets giving me up. I have this vague memory. I was sitting on my aunt's lap, and she was crying as she caressed my hair. My mom came in, grabbed me, and took me to another room right away. The memory isn't very clear because I was so young. I hope I didn't make it up. But when I think about it now, I can feel her touching my hair. In fact, she was humming a song as she was crying. I remember the melody. Whenever my uncle calls my dad, he talks to me and my brother too. He's always very kind to me. How are you, he asks. Do you need anything? We can't come to visit, but I can send it to you. Things like that. Is my uncle my dad? One day I'll find out, no matter what. So, what happens now? You know there is something called a DNA test, but I need samples from my parents. I tried to see if I could do it secretly, but apparently things don't work like they do in the movies. For example, you can do a DNA test with saliva, but apparently an expert has to come and take the saliva sample himself under the right conditions. This means that I can't just take a chewed up gum to the lab. I want to convince my parents to do this test one day. How will I ever face them if the test proves that they really are my parents? This is not something that can be undone. Think about it. Your own child thinks you're not her real parents and makes you take a DNA test. Wouldn't it be too hurtful? This is my story, guys. Now, please tell me, do you think I'm adopted? Or am I just being ridiculous? Does my evidence make sense? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think that my aunt and uncle can be my real parents? I'd be so happy if you could tell me what you think about that as well. If you want to see your story here, you can write it up and send it to the email address in the info section below. Thanks for listening to me. Please help me out with your comments. I really need it.